Squinting at the brilliant screen, Sophia leaned against the edge of the battered kitchen table, her fingers hovering over her laptop's keys. As she mixed her now cold coffee, the gentle hum of the refrigerator filled the still room, broken only by the odd clink of a spoon against a cup. She went over the list of her parents' expenses, which included gas, water, internet, and electricity. She had adopted this monthly routine years ago, without giving it much consideration. She entered the digits into the payment link with accustomed ease, even though they blended together. She mumbled under her breath, $62 for water this time, and gave a little shake of her head. How do they even use this much? With the exception of the faint sound of the television coming from the living room, where her parents, Michael and Sharon Rogers, were probably lounging on the couch, the home was quiet. She looked toward the doorway, imagining her mother curled up beneath the ragged afghan she would not replace, and her father's feet propped up on the ottoman. Sophia knew that if she hadn't been paying these bills, the lights would have gone out a long time ago, the Wi-Fi would have stopped working in the middle of the program, and her dad would have been complaining about it for days. She let out a long, silent sigh that was heavier than she intended. The work wasn't difficult. By this point, she could complete it while sleeping. Occasionally, though, the weight of everything weighed heavily on her. There were moments when she felt like a workhorse, dragging the burden of the entire family on her back as they dragged themselves through life without realizing it. From the other room, her mother's voice called out, "Sophia," softly but with that recognizable undertone of neediness. "Are you about finished in there? Your dad wants to know if we have enough money saved up for pizza tonight." After closing her eyes for a moment and pinching the bridge of her nose, Sophia called out, "Yeah, Mom, I'm on it. We're all right. Pizza is taken care of." "Good," her dad said sternly, his voice muffled by the laugh track on the TV. "Make sure you get that extra cheese, huh?" They couldn't see it, but she mustered a little grin. "Always do, Dad." She sat back in her chair, the wood creaking beneath her, and turned back to the laptop to press submit on the final payment. She simply gazed at the confirmation page for a time, the green checkmark's cheerfulness teasing her. Another month has passed. They carried another load. It all began almost 10 years ago, when Michael broke his hip in a horrific tumble. Gruff, solid, and capable of ignoring a boisterous offender, he had spent years working as a prisons officer. However, everything changed following the injury. The recuperation was far more difficult than the operation. They ignored him when he eventually limped back to the prison on crutches, prepared to take back his position. His boss had murmured, "Sorry, Mike," hardly raising his gaze from his clipboard. "I can't accept the responsibility. You're finished." As a result, Michael was placed on the Social Security payroll, which provides a monthly check to fulfill necessities. At first, it seemed like a little setback, and not a big concern. Sophia recalled him complaining about it throughout dinner, muttering, "I ain't useless, you know," while his fork stabbed at his mashed potatoes. "I simply need time to get my footing." With a calming voice, Sharon had stroked his hand. "Obviously, sweetie, you'll return sooner rather than later." But he didn't return. Months passed, and Michael began to get used to the routine of remaining at home. The TV remote became his scepter, and the chair his throne. Wearing old slippers, he would plod into the kitchen, pour himself a cup of coffee, and settle down to watch repeats or whatever game was on. "Ain't so bad," he would shrug when Sophia inquired about his well-being. "Beats standing in that damn cell block all day." Sharon would say, "He's earned a break, hasn't he?" with a somewhat too optimistic chuckle. Years of arduous labor. Sophia, however, noticed the change. He was no longer required to report for duty, cope with the disorder of the prison, or do anything else. No errands, no chores, and no motivation to start going again. She knew he enjoyed it that way. Day after day, as she watched him sink down into the couch, the notion tormented her. A few years after Michael's hip failed, Sharon was the target of problems once more. It began with a persistent cough, a dry rasp that reverberated throughout the home all day and all night. When Sharon waved it off one evening, Sophia was the first to notice it, looking up from her phone. Just a little tickle, she had grinned artificially. However, that tickling quickly escalated into a full-fledged lung battle within a few days. Pneumonia, the physician said, and it was a horrible one. The actual kicker: because of her allergies, Sharon was unable to take half of her regular medications. She was unable to touch the antibiotics. She would lose her mind on steroids. What ought to have been a simple battle turned into a precarious tightrope walk. "She's tougher than she looks," Michael had grumbled from the hospital waiting room, his voice rough, but his eyes fixed on the floor. Sophia nodded, clutching a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee, but inside, her stomach churned. Sharon spent weeks in and out of the ER, her breaths shallow and ragged, while Sophia shuttled between her own job, the hospital, and home. She'd sit by her mom's bedside, cracking lame jokes to coax a laugh out of her. "You're just trying to get out of doing dishes, aren't you?" Then she'd head straight to the kitchen table to juggle their finances. Bills piled up faster than she could pay them, but she stretched her paychecks thin, covering what Social Security didn't. When Sharon finally pulled through, pale but breathing easier, Sophia thought things might snap back to normal. "You scared us, Mom," she'd said, squeezing her hand as they left the hospital. Sharon smiled weakly. "Takes more than that to knock me out, Soph." Michael clapped her on the back, grinning. "That's my girl." But normal never came. Once they were both in the clear, Michael with his bum hip, Sharon with her fragile lungs, they made a quiet choice: no more work. Social Security checks kept them afloat, and staying home felt comfortable. "We've earned it," Michael would say, kicking back in his recliner. Sharon nodded along, adding, "No sense pushing ourselves silly." Sophia didn't argue. Not at first. She just kept paying the bills: electricity, gas, water, internet, month after month, her fingers flying over the laptop keys. It crept up on her, how they'd gotten used to it, how her role as the family workhorse had solidified without a single word spoken about it. Sophia's sister Harper might as well have been living on a different planet, a sun-soaked place where the days stretched out in a blur of laughter, spontaneous road trips, and bar tabs that somehow never came due. Sophia could picture her now, sprawled out on a friend's couch, her wild curls fanning across a cushion, giggling through a story about some last-minute beach getaway. "You should have seen it, Soph," Harper would say on one of her rare phone calls, her voice bubbling with that effortless charm. "We just packed up and went. No plans, no worries. Bills, they paid themselves, apparently. Problems, poof, vanished like smoke." Harper's world was a magic trick Sophia couldn't quite figure out. She didn't envy her though, not really, but sometimes, late at night, she wondered, was practicality just a fancy word for being stuck? Then she'd shake it off, click submit on another payment, and move on. That's who she was, after all, the one who figured it out. Harper and Sophia weren't your run-of-the-mill sisters. They were like two sides of a coin, spinning in opposite directions from the jump. Harper had that artistic spark even as a little kid, always scribbling in sketchbooks or turning scraps of paper into wild, colorful drawings. She'd spend hours lost in her own world, painting messy swirls on the back porch or stringing beads into lopsided necklaces. Their parents ate it up. "She's got a gift," Sharon would say, pinning Harper's latest masterpiece to the fridge with a proud little hum. Michael would nod along, gruff but beaming. Let her run with it. So they did. Harper got a free pass to skip school whenever the mood struck, trading multiplication tables for a day at the park with her sketchpad, or a trip to the craft store with Sharon trailing behind, arms full of supplies. Sophia, though, she was cut from a different cloth. She was the worker bee, the one who showed up and got it done. Her report cards glowed with A's, especially in math and science, subjects that clicked for her like a lock sliding open. She'd sit at the kitchen table with her textbooks spread out, pencil scratching away, as she solved equations, or sketched out the life cycle of a frog, her brow furrowed in quiet focus. She loved it, the way numbers lined up, and the world made sense through a formula. But there was a hole somewhere in her life, a quiet ache she couldn't quite name. She could still picture that one day in middle school as clear as anything. She'd come home buzzing with something they'd covered in class. Maybe it was planets or photosynthesis, she couldn't recall now, and bounded into the kitchen, where Sharon was stirring a pot of soup. "Mom, did you know the sun's so big you could fit 1,000,000 Earths inside it?" she'd asked, her voice bright with wonder. Sharon didn't even look up. "Sophia, I'm tired," she snapped, her spoon clanging against the pot. "You and your questions, I can't keep up with it. If you're so curious, go to the library and figure it out yourself." The words hit like a slap, sharp and sudden, and Sophia shrank back, her excitement fizzling out. That moment stuck with her, a little pinprick in her memory. It was the first time she really saw it, the way Harper's drawings of Mom and Dad, holding hands, lopsided but bursting with heart, earned gasps and hugs, while Sophia's questions got brushed off like dust. Harper was the golden kid, the one who dazzled them with her creativity. And Sophia was, well, just Sophia. The practical one. She told herself it was fine. Harper's talent was real, and Sophia didn't need the spotlight anyway. But deep down, she started keeping her questions to herself, letting them pile up like books on a shelf she never checked out. All those years later, though, something was brewing. Something that would hit her like a freight train and shake everything she thought she knew. She didn't see it coming, not yet. But it was there, waiting to crack her world wide open. That day, Sophia felt the pull to do something different. Work had been a grind, and the usual routine of bills and chores left her drained, like she was just a cog keeping the family machine running. So, on a whim, she stopped by the bakery on her way home and picked up their favorite, Sharon's beloved lemon raspberry cake, its tangy sweetness a quiet nod to better days. She paired it with a bottle of decent red wine, nothing fancy, but good enough for a real talk. She wanted to sit with them, not as the bill payer or the fixer, but as their daughter, part of the family, not just the one holding it together. When she pushed open the front door, the familiar smells hit her, Sharon's floral perfume, mingling with whatever she was fussing over in the kitchen, and the faint musk of Michael's aftershave drifting from the living room. "Sophia, dear, come in," Sharon called out, her voice bright as she poked her head around the corner, a wooden spoon in hand. "Oh, it's so good you stopped by. I was just thinking about you." "Yeah, daughter." Michael piped up from his throne, the battered recliner parked in front of the TV, where the sports channel blared a basketball game. He flicked his eyes toward her just long enough to register her presence before the screen pulled him back. "You're a bit late today, huh?" "Work, Dad," Sophia said, setting the cake and wine on the counter with a small smile. "You know how it goes." The evening unfolded like it always did, a comfortable rhythm she could have predicted down to the minute. They settled around the kitchen table, mugs of tea steaming beside thick slices of cake. Sharon hummed as she poured, the clink of porcelain a soft soundtrack to Michael's grumbling about the latest politician who ticked him off. "Bunch of clowns running the show," he muttered, stabbing his fork into the cake. Sharon nodded along, then launched into a story about Mrs. Carter next door, who'd apparently started a feud over a misplaced garden gnome. Sophia listened, sipping her tea, letting their voices wash over her. Harper's name came up once. "Oh, she's probably out with friends," Sharon said with a wave of her hand. And Sophia felt that familiar pinch in her chest, a flicker of resentment she swallowed down. Of course she has plans, she thought. When doesn't she? After the plates were cleared, Sophia offered to help Sharon with some cleaning, mostly to keep the night going. "Let's tackle the storage room," Sharon suggested, her eyes lighting up like it was a grand adventure. Sophia groaned inwardly. The room was a dusty, cramped maze of boxes and junk, but she nodded. "Sure, Mom." Sharon was relentless about keeping what she called valuable memories, even if it was just old tax returns or a broken lamp from 20 years ago. They hauled stuff around, sneezing through clouds of dust as they sorted. Sophia was half-heartedly stacking photo albums when her fingers brushed something tucked between a faded quilt and a box of Christmas lights. A small, yellowed envelope. "Will," scrawled across it in shaky ink. Her breath caught. She knew she shouldn't pry. It wasn't her business. Not really. But it sat there like it was daring her, whispering secrets she didn't even know she needed to hear. She glanced at Sharon, who was busy fussing over a cracked picture frame. Then back at the envelope. Her curiosity won out. With trembling fingers, Sophia slid the envelope open, the paper crinkling too loudly in the quiet of the storage room. She darted a glance at Sharon, still distracted, humming softly as she dusted off an old picture frame with a rag. Satisfied her mom hadn't noticed, Sophia unfolded the document inside, her pulse thudding in her ears like a drumbeat. The ink was faded but legible, the words stark against the yellowed page. She scanned the opening lines, standard legal jargon about sound mind and last testament, and then her eyes snagged on the meat of it. "To our daughter, Harper Rogers, we bequeath all our worldly possessions, including but not limited to the family home, all bank accounts, and any remaining assets." Her breath hitched. She read it again, slower, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less brutal. But there it was, plain as day. The house she kept running with utility payments, the accounts she'd stretched her own paycheck to prop up, the life her parents had built, was slated to go to Harper. Just Harper. Sophia's name wasn't even a footnote. A storm churned inside Sophia's chest. Resentment, anger, disappointment, crashing together like waves against a crumbling shore. How could they? The question looped in her head, sharp and insistent. How could they do this to her? The one who'd always been there, who'd picked up the slack, who'd put their needs ahead of her own every single time. She'd never asked for much, never demanded a reward. It wasn't about the house or the money. She didn't need it. Working a night, she'd already clawed her way to a salary that dwarfed whatever her parents had scraped together over the years. The house, the bank accounts, they could have gone up in smoke for all she cared. But to be left out entirely, not even a mention, not a scrap of recognition for everything she'd done, that cut deeper than she'd expected, a wound she hadn't braced for. Her fingers tightened around the paper, crumpling it as she stood there, the dusty air of the storage room thick in her throat. Sharon's voice chirped on in the background. "Oh, so look at this. Old apron, still smells like cinnamon." But it was just noise now, a distant hum. Sophia's eyes stung, not with tears, but with the raw burn of betrayal. She'd spent years telling herself it was fine, that helping them was just what you did, and they couldn't even spare her a line in their will, not a thank you, not a nod to the daughter who'd kept their lights on and their fridge full. With a quick, jerky motion, she folded the document back into its creased envelope, her hands steady despite the chaos in her chest. She slipped it into her jacket pocket, the weight of it pressing against her ribs like a secret she wasn't ready to face. Sharon didn't notice, still lost in her pile of nostalgia. Sophia turned away, forcing her voice to stay even. "Yeah, Mom, that's cute," she managed, though the words tasted bitter. She needed to think, to process, but not here, not now, not with the evidence of her erasure burning a hole in her pocket. The rest of the evening dragged on like a slow-motion nightmare for Sophia. She sat there, perched on the edge of the couch, forcing smiles that felt like they might crack her face in two. Sharon chattered on about the cake, so moist. You picked a good one. And Michael grunted about the game's overtime, oblivious as ever. Sophia nodded along, her voice coming out in hollow little ahas and yas, but inside, she was a furnace. Betrayal simmered, hot and jagged, twisting with anger and a loneliness so deep it hollowed her out. Every laugh she faked, every sip of wine she took, just fueled the fire. She kept her hands busy, wiping crumbs from the table, refilling teacups, anything to stop them from shaking. When it was finally time to go, Sharon pulled her into a warm hug at the door, her arms soft and familiar. "Thank you, dear, for coming," she said, her voice all syrupy gratitude. "It's always so nice to have you around." Sophia's throat tightened, a knot of words she couldn't let loose. She wanted to scream, to shove the envelope in her mom's face and demand, "Why?" Instead, she just nodded, lips pressed into a thin line, and mumbled, "Sure, Mom." Her voice was a thread about to snap, and she pulled back fast, afraid the dam would break if she lingered. Out in the cool night air, her car keys bit into her palm. Sophia made up her mind. No more late nights balancing their checkbook. No more running to the pharmacy for Sharon's allergy-safe meds. No more fixing leaky faucets or hauling groceries up the steps. She was done. Let Harper, the golden child, the heir, the one they'd chosen, step up for once. If they wanted to hand her the keys to their world, she could damn well take the reins too. Sophia slid into her car, the envelope still heavy in her pocket, and started the engine, her resolve hardening with every mile she put between herself and that house. For a little while, the house on Elmwood Lane hummed along like nothing had shifted. Sharon and Michael drifted through their days, wrapped in the same old cocoon of routine. Morning light spilled through the kitchen window as Michael hunched over his coffee, grumbling at the talking heads on the TV. Morning show. "Same old nonsense," he muttered, flipping the channel to something less irritating. Sharon flitted around, wiping down counters that didn't need it, the clatter of dishes a familiar soundtrack to her bustling. The TV droned on in the background, weather, local news, a sale at the hardware store, and life seemed to chug along undisturbed. Sophia's absence didn't register at first. It was just a quiet blip in their world. "She's probably swamped at work," Sharon said one afternoon, stirring a pot of soup, as she glanced at the empty chair where Sophia usually sat. Her tone was light, untroubled, like she was explaining away a late bus. She didn't let herself dwell on it. Sophia was the busy one, after all, always juggling something. Michael barely looked up from his newspaper, the pages rustling as he turned them. "Where's she gonna go?" he scoffed, his voice gruff with certainty. "She'll come running back when she's ready." He folded the paper with a decisive snap and reached for his mug, as if that settled it. But the days stretched on, and Sophia didn't show. No car pulling into the driveway. No quick knock at the door. No "Hey, Mom, need anything?" over the phone. The silence started to feel heavy, unnatural. Sharon's casual shrugs turned into furrowed brows. She'd pick up her phone, thumb hovering over Sophia's name, then set it down with a sigh. Finally, one evening, she gave in and dialed. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. Sophia's clipped, professional greeting cut through the quiet. "Hey, it's me," Sharon said after the beep, her voice a little too bright. "Just checking in. Honorable, call me back when you get a sec." She tried again the next day, and the day after that, but the phone stayed silent on the other end. By the fourth day, Sharon couldn't brush it off anymore. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the spot where Sophia always dropped her keys, a tight knot forming in her chest. "Something's not right," she murmured, more to herself than to Michael, who was sprawled in his recliner, half listening. He grunted, eyes still on the sports highlights. "She's fine, Sharon. Probably just mad about something. She'll get over it." But Sharon wasn't so sure, and the worry started to creep in like a slow leak she couldn't plug. She paced the kitchen, her slippers scuffing against the linoleum as she clutched her phone. She couldn't shake the gnawing worry, so she scrolled to Clee's number and hit call, plastering on a smile she didn't feel. "Clea, hello. It's Sharon, Sophia's mom. How are you, dear?" "Hey, Mrs. Rogers," Clea answered, her tone even and polite, like she'd been expecting this. "We're fine over here. How about you?" Sharon hesitated, then dove in. "I'm worried about Sophia. She's just vanished. No calls, no visits, nothing. Have you seen her lately?" Clea was quiet for a moment. "We've hung out, sure. She's been busy, though. Lots going on." Sharon's grip tightened on the phone. "Did something happen? Did we upset her somehow?" Clee's voice stayed steady. "You'd better ask her yourself, Mrs. Rogers. I can't spill someone else's secrets." The dodge lit a spark of irritation in Sharon. "Come on, Clea, at least give me a hint. I'm her mother, for goodness sake." Claire paused, then softened just a touch. "She needs time and space right now. She'll tell you what's up when she's ready. Look, I'm sorry, but I've got to run. Take care, okay? Bye." The line clicked dead before Sharon could protest. She stood there, phone still pressed to her ear for a second, reeling in a mix of frustration and confusion. She shuffled into the living room and plopped down next to Michael, who was half buried in his recliner, the TV, blaring a car commercial. "I just talked to Clea," she said, her voice tight. "She wouldn't tell me a thing. Just kept saying Sophia needs time and space. What's that even supposed to mean?" Michael snorted, his eyes flicking up from the screen. "What kind of friend says time and space, like some damn self-help book? Bunch of nonsense." He shook his head, irritation masking the unease starting to coil in his gut. Sophia was their rock, always there with a fix or a check. Her disappearing like this didn't sit right. The house felt off without her steady presence, and though he'd never say it out loud, the certainty of her support was slipping away like sand through his fingers. The first real jolt came when Sharon shuffled out to the mailbox one crisp morning, her robe flapping in the breeze. She pulled out a stack of envelopes, electricity, water, internet, and tucked them under her arm out of habit, her mind already skipping ahead to when Sophia would swoop in to sort them. Then it hit her like a brick. Sophia wasn't coming. The bills stared up at her, crisp and unyielding, and for the first time in years, she realized they'd have to face them alone. Back inside, she spread the papers across the kitchen table, her glasses sliding down her nose as she squinted at the fine print. Numbers blurred together, due dates, late fees, account balances, and panic crept up her throat. She grabbed the phone and dialed the utility company, fumbling through the automated menu until a gruff voice finally answered. "Account number," the man barked. Sharon froze. I don't know where that is," she stammered, flipping the bill over like it might magically reveal itself. "Look, ma'am, I can't help you without it," he snapped. After a few more flustered exchanges, she slammed the receiver down, her cheeks burning with frustration. "Michael, what do we do?" she called, her voice wobbling as she waved the bills at him. "I don't understand any of this." Michael lumbered in from the living room, his slippers scuffing the floor, and frowned as he took the stack from her. He sank into a chair, the wood creaking under him, and peered at the pages like they were written in code. He was used to Sophia breezing in, tapping away at her laptop, making it all disappear with a few clicks. "All right, we'll figure it out," he muttered, scratching his jaw, though his confidence was paper-thin. They spent hours hunched over the table, arguing over which bill was most urgent and how to log into the online portals Sophia had always managed. Sharon scribbled notes on a pad, her handwriting shaky, while Michael barked at a helpline operator who hung up on him mid-sentence. By the time they mailed off a check, hoping they'd guessed the right amount, their nerves were frayed, and their bank account was lighter than it should have been, thanks to a late fee they hadn't caught. That night, they slumped at the kitchen table, a cold pot of coffee between them. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Sharon stared at her hands, the lines etched deep from a day of fumbling. For the first time, it sank in. Sophia hadn't just been pitching in, she'd been their lifeline. And now, without her, they were floundering, adrift in a sea of papers and problems they'd never learned to navigate. Sharon's hands shook as she gripped the phone, the silence in the house pressing in around her. She couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. Sophia's absence was a hole she couldn't ignore. She dialed her daughter's number again, half expecting another voicemail, but this time, the line clicked, and Sophia's voice came through, cool and guarded. "Hello, honey, what happened?" Sharon blurted, her voice thick with worry she couldn't mask. "Why don't you call or visit anymore?" "Hey, Mom, you haven't called me honey in ages," Sophia said, a playful lilt in her tone that didn't quite reach her eyes. If Sharon could have seen them. "What's up?" Sharon bristled, caught off guard by the deflection. "Oh, come on, Sophia. What's the matter with you? You haven't come home in a while. You know, your chores and stuff." The words tumbled out without a trace of self-awareness, as if Sophia's role was a given. Sophia let out a small dry laugh, the kind that hid more than it revealed. "Well, why don't you ask Harper to take care of them?" She paused, her finger hovering over the edge of the truth, debating whether to let it spill. Sharon sighed, oblivious to the storm brewing. "Oh, Harper's been busy with her prep for the exhibition. You know how she is." That did it. Sophia's chuckle came again, sharper this time, not amused, but incredulous, like she couldn't believe the script was still playing out. She took a breath, steeling herself. "Isn't she you're here? Let her take care of you now." Sharon froze, the phone suddenly heavy in her hand. She'd never heard Sophia like this, resentment and bitterness twisting through her daughter's tone like barbed wire. "But Sophia, we're your parents," she stammered, grasping for footing. "How can you say that? And how could you do this to me?" Sophia shot back, quick and unrelenting. "I've supported you my whole life, paid your bills, fixed your messes, and you chose to give everything to Harper, who doesn't even spare you a thought." Sharon's throat tightened, a lump forming as she fumbled for an answer. "We just wanted her to have a future," she said weakly, her voice cracking. "And what about my future?" Sophia pressed, her words slicing through the excuses. "Do I just work for you and Harper forever? Is that it?" "No, of course not," Sharon said, desperate now. We didn't think much of it." "Exactly," Sophia snapped, cutting her off. "You never thought about me. Not then, not now. You take it all for granted. Tell me, Mom, when's the last time you said thank you, or told me I did something good? I can't remember. Can you?" Silence. Sharon clutched the phone tighter, but the line had already gone dead. "I get it. Harper's the golden child, off to be some great artist, but until then, what? I'm just the bank." Sharon's voice wavered as she clutched the phone tighter, grasping for something to soften the blow. "Honey, listen, you know your sister isn't exactly thriving out there. We should all support her, all right? And as for the house, well, you're doing so well for yourself, making good money, sustaining yourself. Harper, though, she doesn't really have anything. So your dad and we figured she might need the house more. That's all it was." On the other end, Sophia shook her head, her jaw tight as disbelief washed over her. "Wow, just wow," she said, her voice low and edged with exhaustion. "I didn't need the house, Mom. It was never about that. It was the gesture, you know, feeling like I mattered to you." She didn't wait for a reply. The line went dead with a soft click, leaving Sharon staring at the phone, tears welling up and spilling over as the weight of Sophia's words sank in. She shuffled into the living room, her slippers dragging, and sank onto the couch beside Michael. He was slouched in his recliner, the TV muted for once, the remote dangling loosely in his hand. "I just talked to Sophia," Sharon said, her voice breaking as she wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her cardigan. "She's furious, Michael. She found out about the will. Everything going to Harper." Michael didn't look up right away. He kept his head bowed, staring at the worn patch on the armrest where his elbow always rested. The room was quiet, save for Sharon's shaky breaths, and he felt the confusion twisting in his chest like a knot he couldn't untie. They'd messed up. Badly. He'd always seen Sophia as the steady one, the one who didn't need coddling or fussing over, while Harper was the dreamer they had to prop up. A month slipped by, and Sophia threw herself into a new rhythm, determined to keep her parents out of her head. Work swallowed her days, coding, troubleshooting, meetings that blurred together. In the evenings, she found refuge at the community center's pottery studio. The wheel spun under her hands, cool clay squishing between her fingers as she shaped it into vases, cups, little lopsided figures. Each piece became a vessel for the storm inside her, anger that flared hot and sharp, resentment that simmered low, and buried beneath it all, a fragile thread of hope she couldn't quite snuff out. The steady hum of the wheel and the earthy smell of clay steadied her, a quiet rebellion against the chaos she'd left behind. One evening, as she was smoothing the rim of a vase, her phone buzzed on the workbench, cutting through the studio's calm. She wiped her hands on her apron and glanced at the screen. Harper's name flashed. Her stomach tightened, but she answered. "Hey, what's up?" "Sophia, it's Dad," Harper said, her voice high and shaky, laced with panic. "He's not well. He needs surgery. Like, right now. We need your help. Please." Sophia's hands stilled, a lump of clay dropping onto the wheel with a soft thud. She knew Michael's heart had been a ticking time bomb for years. Murmurs about cholesterol and checkups had floated around family dinners. But this, what happened? She asked, forcing her voice to stay even, though her pulse was already racing. Harper's words tumbled out in a rush. "He had a heart attack this morning. The doctors say it's bad, blocked arteries or something. He needs surgery fast, but it's crazy expensive, and we don't have the money. Mom's losing it, so I've been scrambling, calling people, trying to pull something together, but it's not enough." Silence stretched across the line as Sophia stared at the half-formed vase, her mind spinning faster than the wheel ever could. Two forces collided inside her, resentment, bitter and heavy from a month of hardening, and love, raw and stubborn, tugging at the roots of who she was. She could still see the will in her mind, Harper's name inked where hers should have been. The sting of it burned fresh. But then she pictured Michael. Gruff, stubborn Michael, who taught her how to ride a bike and cheered too loud at her math competitions. Her chest ached at the thought of losing him. They were her parents, her family, flawed and all. She took a deep breath, the clay's damp chill grounding her. "Okay," she said finally, her voice steady but quiet. "I'll help." Love had won, but it didn't feel like a victory, just a messy, inevitable truth. Michael made it through the surgery, the doctors working their magic to patch up his battered heart. It was a long, tense few hours, but when the surgeon came out with a tired smile and a thumbs up, the knot in Sophia's chest loosened just a bit. Recovery started slow, tubes and beeping monitors at first, but Michael pulled through, grumbling about hospital food within days. When Sophia stepped into his hospital room for a visit, Sharon was there, hovering by the bed. Before Sophia could say a word, her mom crossed the room and wrapped her in a tight, trembling hug. "Thank you, Sophia," Sharon whispered, her voice breaking as tears soaked into Sophia's shoulder. "You saved his life. We'll never forget this." Sophia stood stiffly at first, then softened, patting her mom's back awkwardly. She didn't know what to say. Gratitude from Sharon felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Soon enough, Michael was cleared to go home, still weak but stubborn as ever, insisting he could walk to the car himself until a nurse wheeled him out. Back at the house, Sharon buzzed with nervous energy, determined to pull together a family dinner. "It's to celebrate Michael getting well and coming home," she said, fussing with a stack of plates. Then she paused, glancing at Sophia. "And it's for you, Sophia. Thank you." The words hung there, rare and fragile. Sophia blinked, caught off guard by the spotlight she'd never stood in before. She didn't hesitate long. "Let me help," she said, rolling up her sleeves. Then, with a glance at Sharon's watery eyes, she added, "Actually, Mom, why don't you stay with Dad? He needs you right now. Harper and I can handle dinner." Sharon froze, her lip quivering, then nodded silently, and slipped away to the living room, brushing tears from her cheeks as she went. Sophia turned to Harper, who'd been lingering by the counter, and gave her a small, determined nod. Sophia slipped into the kitchen, her movements quiet and deliberate, as she started rifling through the pantry. She pulled out a half-empty bag of flour, a jar of sauce with barely a spoonful left, and frowned. "They haven't shopped in forever," she muttered, glancing at Harper, who was hovering near the sink. Harper gave a small shrug, and Sophia nodded toward the door. "Come on, we're going to the store." They grabbed their coats and headed out, the car humming to life as they pulled away. That short drive, mundane, routine, would soon turn into a pivot point Sophia never saw coming. The trip to the grocery store was quick but tense, the silence between them thick and unbroken. Sophia gripped the wheel, her eyes on the road, while Harper stared out the passenger window, her gaze fixed on nothing, avoiding even a glance in her sister's direction. They loaded the cart with chicken, potatoes, and fresh herbs, enough for a decent meal, and drove back, the quiet stretching on, heavy with something unsaid. Sophia parked in the driveway, reaching for the door handle when Harper's hand shot out, grabbing hers with a sudden, desperate grip. "Wait," Harper said, her voice low and urgent. Sophia froze, turning to look at her sister, and what she saw stopped her cold. Harper's eyes were red-rimmed, brimming with a raw mix of pain and something softer, something pleading. "Just hold on," Harper whispered, her fingers trembling against Sophia's. "I've got to tell you something." Sophia's breath caught. She'd never seen Harper like this, so unguarded, so broken open. Harper held her gaze, tears spilling over as she struggled to find the words. "I'm so sorry," she finally choked out. "I'm so sorry for everything you've had to go through. All of it." Sophia's heart lurched, a dam inside her cracking under the weight of Harper's apology. She'd never heard anything like this, not from Harper, not from anyone in their family. Her throat tightened, her voice splintering as she tried to respond. It's okay, Harper," she managed, blinking back her own tears. Everything's okay. You're my family." Harper shook her head, a sob escaping as she gripped Sophia's hand tighter. They sat there for a moment, the air between them heavy with years of unspoken things. Then Harper's voice dropped even lower, her eyes darting away before locking back on Sophia's. "Mom never loved you, Soph," she said, the words tumbling out like they'd been festering too long. "She always saw you as competition, a threat to me. She treated you like you were in my way." Sophia's breath hitched, her mind reeling as Harper's confession sank in. Harper turned her face away, tears streaming down her cheeks, her shoulders shaking. "I've hated her for it," she admitted, her voice barely of a whisper. "All my life, I've hated her for what she did to you." She grabbed Sophia's hand again, squeezing it like a lifeline, then glanced around the car, her eyes flickering with a nervous edge, as if terrified their parents might somehow overhear. Harper's tear-streaked face softened, her eyes brimming with a mix of love and aching pity as she tightened her grip on Sophia's hand. "If your real mother were alive," she said, her voice quivering but steady with conviction, "she'd have loved you. You wouldn't have been treated like this, not your whole life." Sophia blinked, confusion clouding her mind at first, the words bouncing around like they didn't quite fit. What do you mean? She stammered, her brow furrowing. Then, like a thunderclap, it struck her, a blow so fierce it knocked the air from her lungs. Her world tilted, flipped upside down in an instant. Her whole life flickered before her, every slight, every cold shoulder, every moment she'd been pushed aside, suddenly snapping into focus with brutal clarity. The way Sharon had brushed off her questions as a kid, snapping at her curiosity like it was a nuisance. The opportunities that slipped by, Harper's art supplies funded while Sophia's science camp went unmentioned. The warmth she craved, the love she chalked up to her own shortcomings, always just out of reach. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't some flaw in her. It was them. Sharon, Michael, this family she poured herself into. And now Harper's words cracked it all open. She wasn't their daughter, not by blood. Harper's voice broke as she clung to Sophia's hand, tears spilling freely now. "I'm so sorry, Soph," she said, her words tumbling out between shaky breaths. "I've been such a coward all these years. I should have said something. I should have done something. I never wanted to be her daughter, not like this. Mom, she always pushed me, you know, always shoved me forward, told me I had to be better than you, to outshine you. It was like some sick game to her, and I hated it. I hated every second of it." Sophia sat there, stunned, her mind still reeling from the bombshell Harper had dropped. Harper's apologies layered onto the shock, each one a pinprick against the raw wound of realization. She could see it now, Sharon's subtle jabs disguised as encouragement, the way Harper's every sketch or doodle got framed, while Sophia's achievements barely earned a nod. Harper had been the golden child, not by choice, but by design, a puppet in Sharon's twisted need to prove something, and Harper, caught in the middle, had carried the guilt of it, silently resenting the roles she'd been forced to play. Harper's voice trembled as she pressed on, her hands still clutching Sophia's like an anchor. "I found out when I was graduating high school," she said, her eyes distant, reliving the memory. "Mom and Dad were in the living room, talking about college, where I'd go, what they could afford. I was coming down the stairs, and I heard her say it. Mom said, 'Your real mother could never have given you what she was giving you,' like it was some big favor she'd done. I didn't get it at first, but it clicked later. You were adopted." Sophia sat there, the words sinking into her like stones, shifting the ground beneath her. Her mind raced, darting away from Sharon and Michael, landing instead on a new figure, a shadow she'd never known, her biological mother. The thought sparked something wild in her chest, a flutter of excitement cutting through the fog of betrayal. Who was she? What was she like? For a split second, Sophia felt a surge of joy, a longing to chase that mystery, to know the woman who'd brought her into the world. She turned to Harper, her voice soft but urgent. "Do you know anything about her? My real mom?" Harper's eyes met hers, brimming with pity and a deep, aching empathy that hit Sophia like a wave. That look, it shattered the fleeting excitement, replacing it with a hollow pain that swelled in her throat. Tears welled up, slow at first, then spilling over as she blinked. The joy was gone, drowned by the sudden, crushing weight of everything she'd lost before she'd even known it was hers. Wordlessly, they climbed out of the car and started unloading the grocery bags, the rustle of plastic and the clink of cans filling the silence. Sophia moved like a ghost, her hands working on autopilot, chopping vegetables, boiling water, while tears slipped down her cheeks. She swiped at them with the back of her hand, trying to keep it together, but they kept coming. Harper watched her, understanding flickering in her eyes, and every so often, she'd steer Sharon away from the kitchen with a forced chirp. "Hey, Mom, can you check on Dad?" she'd say, giving Sophia space to breathe. Finally, as the pot simmered and the house filled with the scent of roasting chicken, Harper shut the kitchen door with a quiet click. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and pulled Sophia into a warm, enveloping hug. Sophia's hands faltered, a knife clattering to the counter, and then she broke. The dam gave way, and she sobbed into Harper's chest, her body shaking with the force of it. Harper held her tight, her own tears falling silently, letting Sophia cry out the years of hurt, the revelations, the mother she'd never known. They stood there, locked together, the world outside the kitchen fading as Sophia let herself fall apart in the only arms that felt safe. A few days later, Sophia and Harper stood side by side in a quiet cemetery, the air cool and heavy with the scent of damp earth. Before them was a modest headstone, weathered by time. The name Jasmine was etched into the gray stone. Sophia stared at it, her hands shoved deep into her coat pockets, her breath fogging in the crisp morning air. Harper shifted beside her, her voice soft but steady as she began to speak. "After I found out you were adopted, I couldn't let it go," Harper said, her eyes tracing the letters on the grave. "I started digging, secretly, because I knew Mom would lose it if she caught me. I pieced it together bit by bit. Jasmine, she was Mom's younger sister." Sophia's head snapped toward Harper, her eyes wide. "Her sister." Harper nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, Aunt Jasmine. Mom never talked about her. None of us did. From what I found, Jasmine didn't have it easy, but not in the way you'd think. She was the baby of the family, and Grandma and Grandpa spoiled her rotten. Mom was the one stuck doing everything, cooking, cleaning, keeping the house together, while Jasmine got all the attention, all the love. It messed them both up, I think." Sophia listened, her mind spinning, as Harper went on. "When Jasmine was 17, she fell in with this crowd. Bad news, all of them. They drank, partied, did drugs, the whole spiral. She got pregnant with you. She was young, reckless, didn't know what she was doing, but she had you. You were her kid. Then, when you were 1, she overdosed. Took too much one night and didn't wake up." Sophia's chest tightened, a dull ache spreading as she pictured it. A teenage Jasmine, wild and lost, cradling a baby she couldn't raise. Harper's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "After she died, Grandma and Grandpa begged Mom to take you in. They didn't want you to know about Jasmine, about any of it. They told Mom to adopt you, raise you as hers, and bury the truth so deep you'd never find it. I guess Mom said yes, but she never let go of what Jasmine did to her growing up." As Harper spoke, her voice weaving the tangled threads of their family's past, Sophia's tears fell unchecked, streaming down her face in quiet rivers. She clutched a small bouquet of daisies she'd brought, simple, white, the only thing that felt right, and knelt to place them gently on Jasmine's tombstone. The petals caught her tears, tiny droplets glistening as they soaked into the flowers, marking the stone with her grief. She didn't try to stop crying. The weight of it all, Jasmine's life, her death, the years of silence, poured out of her, mingling with the earth where her real mother rested. Harper stood beside her, silent now, letting Sophia weep for the mother she'd never known, and the life she'd been shaped by without ever understanding why. Sophia stared at the grave, the name Jasmine blurring through a film of tears. Her mother, her real mother, had been a troubled girl, a shadow in Sharon's life, and Sophia had been the living echo of that pain. It explained so much. Sharon's coldness, the way she'd favored Harper, the resentment Sophia had always felt but never understood. She was Jasmine's daughter, a reminder Sharon couldn't escape, and that truth had shaped her life in ways she was only now beginning to grasp. The weeks that followed were a storm inside Sophia, a churning battle between rage and resignation, hurt and clarity. She wrestled with the idea of confronting Sharon and Michael, her aunt and uncle now, not her parents, imagining the words she'd hurl at them, the questions she'd demand they answer. But each time she played it out, the fire fizzled into a cold, hard truth. It wouldn't change a thing. Jasmine wouldn't rise from that grave. The past wouldn't rewrite itself. And Sharon and Michael, frail and faltering in their own ways, wouldn't suddenly become the family she'd longed for. So she made a choice, not to confront them. Not now, maybe not ever. Justifying Sharon was like trying to hold water in her hands. It kept slipping through, leaving her grasping. Sophia sat for hours, staring at the ceiling of her apartment, turning it over in her mind. Sharon had been a kid once too, overshadowed by Jasmine, burdened with chores while her little sister danced through life. Maybe that resentment had festered, twisting into the coldness she'd aimed at Sophia, the living echo of her rival. Maybe she'd taken Sophia in out of duty, not love, and spent years punishing her for sins she didn't commit. It wasn't fair. None of it was. But Sophia was practical to her core. She'd always been the one to find solutions, not wallow in problems. Punishing Sharon wouldn't heal her, and with Michael still recovering, his heart a fragile thing, the timing felt wrong. The bills piled up again, and after a long quiet debate with herself, Sophia picked up the laptop and started paying them once more. Not out of obligation, but out of a strange, stubborn resolve to keep going, to not let their mess sink her too. Yet, amid the wreckage of her old life, something bright took root. Harper. Out of the ashes of their fractured family, Harper emerged as a lifeline, a real sister, not just in name, but in soul. That day in the car, her confession had cracked open a door, and in the weeks since, they'd stepped through it together. Harper called her just to talk, not to ask for anything, no favors, no fixes, just to hear her voice. They met for coffee, laughing over stupid things, like Harper's latest art flop, a lopsided sculpture she'd nicknamed the Leaning Disaster. Sophia felt a warmth she'd never known from family before. Harper cared, truly cared. One Saturday, Harper showed up at Sophia's place with a pizza and a bottle of wine, plopping onto the couch like she belonged there. "I'm not letting you mope over Clay all weekend," she teased, nudging Sophia with her foot. They talked for hours, about Jasmine, about Sharon's warped logic, about the lives they wanted to build beyond it all. And slowly, Sophia's guarded edges softened. One evening, as they stood in Sophia's kitchen washing dishes, Harper paused. "You know, Soph," she said, voice quiet but firm, "you're the strongest person I know. I wish I'd told you that sooner." Sophia looked at her, the weight of years lifting just a little, and smiled. A real one, small, but steady. "Better late than never," she replied, flicking water at Harper, who yelped and laughed. At that moment, Sophia knew she'd found her family. And that was enough. A tether to something good, something real. She'd keep molding her vases and her life, one steady turn of the wheel at a time, with a sister by her side who finally saw her for all she was.